My name is Marjorie Ellis, and I'm 71 years old. I live in a quiet corner of Northern Virginia, in the same brick house I bought with my late husband almost 40 years ago. People always tell me I look younger than my age, but I feel every one of my years, especially in my knees and in the soft ache that settles in my chest whenever I think about how different life became after he passed. Most days I keep to myself. I water my roses, feed the finches that come to the backyard, and make small lists of things I might do tomorrow. It's a gentle life, quiet and uncomplicated, or at least I believed it was. There's a particular loneliness that comes with aging. It isn't about the silence in the house or the empty chair at the table. It's about the people who stay in your life but forget how to see you. My sons, Isaac and Matthew, visit when it's convenient. Birthdays, holidays, the occasional check-in that feels more like an obligation than concern. I used to make excuses for them. They're busy, they're raising families, they're building careers. But lately, I've wondered whether they stopped viewing me as someone to cherish and started seeing me as someone to manage. Before I begin, please subscribe to the channel and tell me in the comments where you're watching from. I love seeing how far these stories travel. The story I'm about to share began last spring when I took a short weekend trip to Charlottesville to visit an old friend from church. I left my house early that Friday morning, turning off every light and locking each window with the care of someone who has lived long enough to know better. I even unplugged the toaster, something my sons tease me about constantly. The drive was peaceful. I remember the scent of honeysuckle drifting through the open window and thinking it was going to be a lovely weekend. When I returned home on Sunday afternoon, I noticed the front door was slightly open. The air inside felt different, disturbed, like someone had been breathing in my living room while I was gone. I walked slowly, my heartbeat loud enough that it drowned out the distant rumble of traffic. Drawers were open, cushions tossed onto the floor. The jewelry box from my dresser was gone, and on the kitchen counter, an empty space where my late husband's watch used to sit. My hands trembled as I called the police. The officer who arrived spoke gently, but his eyes drifted more than once toward me, as if wondering whether I had forgotten to lock something. I told him I was meticulous, that I had checked each lock twice. He nodded politely, but his expression didn't soften. My sons arrived shortly after, stepping inside with the kind of exaggerated caution you'd use with a fragile object. They looked around, sighed heavily, and exchanged the sort of glances I had seen them give each other ever since their father died. Glances that said I wasn't thinking clearly, that I needed more help than I admitted. Isaac told the officer I tend to misplace things. Matthew said I get overwhelmed easily. They didn't say these things with cruelty, they said them with certainty, which somehow felt worse. I stood there in the center of the living room, surrounded by the absence of my things, listening to my own children dismiss me as though I were a confused old woman inventing a burglary. I didn't argue. I didn't raise my voice. I simply folded my hands and let the moment pass over me like a cold wind. But something in me cracked, soft and quiet. It wasn't anger, it was awakening. Over the next few days, I replayed the scene in my mind. The half-open door, the officer's doubt, my son's patronizing tone. But there was something else, something easily missed. When the officer asked if anything looked different beyond the mess, Isaac had answered too quickly, pointing out that I always leave the back window unlocked. But I knew I had locked it. More importantly, I had never told him about the small wooden box I kept hidden in my bedroom closet, the one containing bonds from my husband's retirement plan. And that box was gone. My sons didn't know about it. No one did, unless someone had dug deeper than a common thief would dare. A few days later, when Isaac visited to check on me, he moved through the house with an odd confidence, almost like he already knew where things belonged. I watched him quietly. His eyes lingered on the new lock I had placed on my closet door. Something shifted in his expression, fast, subtle, but revealing. That was the moment everything clicked. I started going through my home, not looking for missing items, but for signs, details out of place, drawers opened in ways that suggested familiarity rather than intrusion. I found a small smudge near the back door, the kind left by someone who knew exactly where to press the latch. Then I checked the outdoor camera I installed years ago. The recording had been deleted. The only person who knew the security code was Isaac, because he helped me set it up. My sons had always been practical, efficient, capable of making decisions that felt cold but necessary. But I never imagined that desperation or entitlement might twist those traits into something darker. Isaac had been having financial trouble for months. He told me a little, but not everything. He must have seen those bonds once, maybe when he fixed the shelf in my closet last year. Maybe he believed they shouldn't sit unused when he needed them more. It wasn't just a robbery. It was a betrayal of the most intimate kind, one wrapped in familiarity, convenience, and the assumption that I would never notice. I didn't confront him. I didn't tell Matthew either, because he would have defended his brother. Instead, I visited an attorney, a woman named Ellen, who spoke to me with the dignity I had been starving for. I explained everything: the missing items, the deleted footage, the bonds, the suspicion I could no longer ignore. She listened, and then she showed me how to protect myself. Over the next month, I changed every lock, installed a new camera system, updated all financial accounts to require my presence and identification. I adjusted my will. I documented every detail of the burglary and every piece of evidence suggesting it wasn't a stranger. I didn't do any of this out of anger. I did it out of self-respect. And then, one quiet afternoon, I filed a report, not accusing my son directly, but stating clearly that the burglary showed signs of familiarity, access, and deleted footage. The investigator said they'd look into it. I knew what that meant, and I also knew Isaac would eventually be questioned. My sons still visit, but not as often. Isaac avoids my eyes. Matthew senses something but doesn't know what. The distance doesn't hurt as much as I expected. In fact, it feels like peace. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it's a boundary finally drawn, a truth acknowledged, a life reclaimed by someone who was underestimated for far too long. I still live in my brick house. I still water my roses. But now, when I look at my reflection in the kitchen window, I see a woman who woke up, not because she was robbed, but because she was finally done being dismissed. There is strength in surviving, but there is power in being believed, even if you're the only one who believes yourself at first.